All right, good morning. My name is Ryan Kleps, and before I actually get into the content of this presentation, let me just tell you a little bit about it so you can tell if this is something that you want to continue to listen to or you want to go somewhere else. So what I'm essentially going to do is tell you some stories about some things that happened, some things that transpired, mainly as we put some training together within Boeing IT. So it's not going to be a step-by-step approach. This is what you can do. But if you listen carefully, you might notice some similarities between what you're doing, between your environment, and between what happened in our case. And you may be able to transfer some of those concepts. So there I was, minding my own business, just going through life, working in the process group in Boeing IT. We were putting a class together, and little realizing that what I was doing actually had names. There were actually names to what I was doing. So what I'd like to do then is tell you about how some of these things fit together in my experience and how it could potentially fit in your world as well. Now, I suspect that there are a number of people here that are here just to hear how to pronounce one of these words. So I don't want to disappoint you. I want to do that up front again, so if that's all you came for, you'll be able to hear that, and you'll be able to move on to something that's more interesting to you. So I've got a little pronunciation guide here, and let me just help you with that. All right. This is the word. It's a big word. You pronounce it this way: gamification. Say it with me. Gamification. Okay. And I'll go beyond that and tell you what it means. It's the use of game thinking and mechanics in non-game context. So if that's what you're looking for, you can leave. There's another word, though. It's not the word "and," but it's another word that starts with A, and it's this one. And I think that there are in the audience some people who really know how to pronounce this, and they're probably just here watching to see how I'm going to mispronounce it. But I'll do my best. I don't speak this. I don't speak Scandinavian, Norwegian, Danish, Swedish. But I think I can pronounce one word. I'll try it. Arbejdsglaede. Say it with me. Arbejdsglaede. Some people also pronounce it Arbejdsglaede, but I go with Arbejdsglaede. It's kind of the Arnold Schwarzenegger pronunciation. This is a word that I just found out about recently. It's found in Scandinavian languages, and it means joy or happiness at work. And as far as I know, it's not a term that's used in any other language. Now, there are some other languages that have other words relating to work, such as in Japanese, there's a word karoshi, which means death by overwork. But that's not quite the same thing. That's not quite moving in the direction that we want to be moving in. Probably in English, the nearest term would be job satisfaction, but that's still, it seems to be kind of lacking. But Arbejdsglæde, it's really enjoying the work that you're doing and appreciating that as part of your life. Just to give you a little background, again, my name is Ryan Kleps. I work at a large aerospace company headquartered in Chicago, Illinois. You can see some of the stats there about my company. If you flew to get here, there's a good chance that you flew on one of the products that my company makes. And what does that have to do with gamification and Arbejdsglæde? Well, what I would say is if you can experience Arbejdsglæde, if you can do some gamification in a large company like Boeing, then there's hope for you. There's hope for your environment as well. Because I kind of work in an environment there's a lot of cubicles, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of overhead, some might say bureaucracy as well. But somehow I was able to carve out this little niche of gamification and Arbejdsglæde. I think it gives you some hope. So if you're in a situation like that, I think we've heard some other speakers that talk about how that's being done in large corporations. I want to tell you a little bit about how I did that and give you some hope, hopefully. Now, it's kind of interesting because as I've been looking at how my work has gone. I've been at Boeing for about 25 years, large corporate settings, and I realized just recently that there have been times during that time that I really was already doing some of these things without even knowing it. As I said, I just kind of stumbled across the gamification, Arbejdsglaede, just recently, and looking back even further, I realized that I've always tried to bring some fun, some enjoyment into the work that I do. I think that we were created to enjoy our work, and by adding some things to that work, we can make it more interesting. So, in the corporate setting, a lot of times we deal with acronyms and things, and so rather than just sticking with some standard acronyms, I remember trying to come up with funny and creative names. There were other situations where I was talking about a particular process, and I took that process and I equated it to the daily commute that I made, and it kind of just made it fun that way. Taking virtual meetings and turning that into a game. I can remember there was one particular situation where we were doing some training. We were doing training on a process, I think it was, and I was given the assignment of conducting this 4-hour virtual meeting. I thought, oh man, 4 hours. If you've ever been in a virtual meeting, there's a lot of multitasking that goes along, right? So I thought, well, how could we do that? How could we do that in a way that would kind of be fun? Then I thought of buzzword bingo. If you ever read Dilbert, you've probably seen that scenario where there's the group is going to this big meeting, the big wigs are going to be there, and they start handing out these bingo cards. So whenever you hear a particular term, you mark it on your card, and if you get them all right, you get bingo. Well, I thought, well, what if we did something like that? So I tried it and said, well, what you really want to do in a virtual setting is you want to encourage people to speak up, because many times, in fact, it seems like the larger the group you have, the less people speak. How could we encourage people to speak up? And I thought, well, what if we did kind of a variation of buzzword bingo, only we used the names of the people in the class? So we did that. Put a little bingo card together. When people came to the class, they got their card, but it had their name on it. And so there was some incentive in that case to speak up, and it even led to some funny things about, one person knew the answer to a question, but he didn't speak up because he was waiting for somebody else to speak up because he needed that for the bingo card. So in any case, it just kind of made the whole thing fun. So I realized, I've been doing this for a while, and you can do it in a corporate setting. But the main thing that I want to tell you about is how I've incorporated these things in something called the Agile Training Camp. So there we were, 4 of us, back in 2008. We had just recently rolled out a new process, a variation of our standard software development process that's based on Agile. And we thought, well, what's the next step? What could we do after that? And we thought, well, you know what? The people probably need some training. So we thought, okay, let's put a training class together that'll teach them Agile, and it'll also have some other practical aspects. So we wanted to teach them Agile in a way that we'd illustrate how Agile is done by the way that we conducted the class. That was one thing that we wanted to do. Another thing that we wanted to accomplish was have the exercises in the class be meaningful, so that when people left the class, they would have a starting point on what they were going to be doing when they got back to their regular work. We also wanted to make the class helpful for team building, a team building aspect to the class, because oftentimes in Boeing, big company, spread out across the country, some of these folks are working on a team where they've never actually met the people that they're working with. It's all virtual. So we thought, well, let's try to incorporate an element to the class that helps to bring people together and helps to promote teamwork. So as we were thinking about this, I was at a conference, and I just started fixating on this number 100. What is it about 100 in this class? What could we do? What's something that would relate to that? And then I thought, well, American football field is 100 yards long. What if we just took a football theme and incorporated it with the class? Well, interestingly enough, in parallel, I was also teaching a children's church class at our church. And in this particular curriculum, what they did was they based it on a movie theme. And they took the class and they split it into 2 halves. And there was this sort of friendly competition that went on during the Sunday school class, where people would get points for answering questions or memorizing Bible verses or inviting friends and that kind of thing. And the kids seemed to really enjoy it. And I thought, well, what if we did something like that? What if we did something similar in this adult corporate class? And we did it. We never really knew how it would work. We thought, well, let's just try it out. Let's see what would happen. So we've got this low-tech gamified theme with Nerf footballs and this football theme, and we've got a deal where it's based on children's church curriculum, and we didn't really know what would happen. So there's a little bit of fear in that very first class where we asked people, okay, now you're going to have to get up from your table and hold this Nerf football so that your teammate can kick it at a target on the wall. We never really knew how people would respond to it. But we found out that, hey, adults like to play games too, and in fact, they really kind of enjoyed the class. So we went on, we continued on, and just to give you a little bit more of a description about the class and how we put it together, as I mentioned, we had this American football theme that's part of it. We wanted to make it competitive, so we take the class, we divide it into the X's and the O team, and you're assigned to a team. You don't have a choice. Wherever you sit, you're on that team. We use these short time boxes, so a 25-minute, it's called a Pomodoro. You do something for 25 minutes and you take a 5-minute break. So you're cycling through this during the day. It's multi-sensory, so it's not just sitting and listening to speakers. It's doing exercises. It's occasionally getting up and throwing or kicking a football. We wanted to make the class self-policing as well. And so we thought, well, how do you do that from a football standpoint? Because this is part of illustrating how Agile works. Agile teams are supposed to be self-organizing, empowered, and so forth. Well, how do you do that? How do you sort of enforce the rules of the class in an Agile way? Well, we thought, well, what do you do with football, right? On a football field, there are flags that are thrown. So what we do in the class is we have a list of rules for the class that are posted on the wall, and we give each table their own yellow flag, so that whenever they see a violation of one of those rules from the other team, they pick up a flag and they can throw it. They gain yardage for their team. And the way that we track things, the way that we track progress is we have this football field posted up on the wall. Each team has their own little helmet, and every time they answer questions correctly, complete an exercise, that little helmet marches down the field closer to the end zone. Same thing happens then with the flags. They flag the other team, they gain yardage for their own team. And that can lead to some interesting dynamics as well, because sometimes people on one side of the room know people on the other side of the room, and we have a thing about cell phones not going off, a rule about that. And so it can kind of make things interesting, because sometimes people will say, I wonder if that guy turned his phone off. They'll try calling him. If it goes off, they get yardage. So it just leads to, it kind of makes it fun. The overall aspect of it, people would characterize it as being a fun class. So from that perspective, the way that we've gamified things, it's really worked very well. I'd like to tell you, though, a few stories about some Arbejdsglaede, some occurrences that have happened in the class that just kind of illustrate how the gamification of this class has really led to people experiencing joy in the workplace. So the first one, I call it a St. Louis uprising. This was in the first year of the class that we did it. We normally do our classes in Puget Sound. In this case, we went over to St. Louis. And the particular room that we were in St. Louis wasn't an ideal setting for this class, because we kind of like something like this, where it's big open spaces, room to put our football field on the floor, and so forth. But in this case, it was more of an amphitheater. So you can see one of my fellow instructors there, John, standing at the base of this amphitheater. And what we do as we go through the class at the end of each day, as a way of reviewing material, we have what's called a 2-minute drill, where we give each team 2 minutes to answer up to 10 questions and move their football helmet down the field. Well, we happened to be at the end of one particular class. It was a really close contest from a score standpoint, and the last team got up there. They threw their football at the target. I don't remember if they hit it or not. But in any case, what happened was the class didn't like the way that we called it. So as teachers, we also act as referees. We made the call one way. It was an unpopular decision. And so what they ended up doing, people from this class, or at least half the people from the class, they took up their manuals and they were throwing them at us here at the bottom of this pit. Not the kind of thing that you expect to see happening at Boeing, but it did happen. I think I put this under the category of Arbejdsglaede because it reinforced that idea of a team. They were a team. They were united against us, but they were united as a team. So it helped to produce and strengthen the relationships that they had there in the team. Second one there, I've called it Doug's Surprise. So Doug is the individual here in the purple shirt. Happened to be an individual that I'd worked with before. So I knew some things about Doug. And when we do this 2-minute drill at the end of the day, we give them a practice question. So they kind of see how long does it take to answer a question as a team so that they can then sort of pace themselves for the remaining questions. So we had a practice question. I thought, what if I just modified the question a little bit based on what I knew about Doug? So I did that. I changed the question. It came out to be something like, who finished second to John Elway in a punt, pass, and kick competition? So I put the question up there. They read it, and just to see the expression on Doug's face when he saw that, you could tell it was something that really brought joy to him. So if you know some things in a good way about people, you can also use that information to help to produce some Arbejdsglæde in the workplace. Leftover football. That's this one down here, the lower right. This is a situation where we did a class in Florida. Again, it wasn't an ideal location. It was sort of a smallish room, pretty low ceiling. Wasn't ideal. Couldn't move things around very well. But as part of the class, one of the things that we do is we have people build paper footballs to simulate this Agile process. And to show that they're doing it correctly, there's some tests that they have to pass. So one is to be able to flick the football 10 feet. So they were practicing that, going through the simulation. One guy flicked it, and it got stuck up in the ceiling tiles. Again, it's a corporate situation, environment. We thought, okay, well, I guess we're going to have to get that down somehow. But the people who worked there, they said, no, let's just leave it. Let's leave it there in memory of this class. So that's one of the things that this class does as well, is it, in gamifying the material, is it helps to provide memories, common memories, shared memories that really help to bring people together. It so happened that a couple of years later, I called one of the guys that worked in that facility, and I said, hey, remember when we did that class in there? Is that football still sticking up in the tiles? And he said, yep, we just left it there. So it's the kind of thing, again, that helps to bring people together and brings joy. Last one here, the crying MVP. So this is one of those surprise and delight type of situations. Usually, at the end of the day, the end of the class, we surprise someone, we recognize someone for their contributions to the class and their involvement in the theme, at least not opposing the theme, right? The minimum requirements there. You at least can tolerate football. So in this particular case, there was a lady who had been an active participant in the class. She got involved in the football theme. And I approached her and said, hey, congratulations, you're the MVP for this class. And rather than, appearing to be really happy about it, she started crying. And I thought, wow, what's going on here? Well, she explained the situation, and that was, you know what, I've been working in this group, been working in this company for a long time, and I know this stupid little award, but it really means something to me. It really meant something to her to be recognized, so much so that I guess there were tears of joy. But that's the kind of thing that you can get when you gamify your experiences. It can really bring some joy into the workplace. All right. What are some lessons learned from this experience? I think, as the previous speaker talked about, even something as nebulous, as free, as cheap as yardage can be motivating. There have been many times in the class where students are working on an exercise, and it's the timer. We time box everything, as I mentioned. As the timer is running down, they're saying, you know what, we got to complete this exercise so that we can gain yardage. So even just this little idea of moving a little football helmet down the field can be motivating, and it's free. It doesn't cost anything. Surprisingly, too, perhaps, we have people that come into the class who they say, oh, it's a football theme. I don't really like football. This is going to be bad. But afterwards, the feedback that we get is that, hey, we really enjoyed it because the theme didn't overwhelm the content, and it was done in a way that respected people and provided a fun environment. So even non-football fans say they've enjoyed the class. One of the things that this class does as well, I think, in doing things like this, gamifying the experience, is it allows people the freedom to have some fun, to relax, and to be more creative. Because studies have shown if you're more relaxed, if you're in a fun, creative environment, you can actually increase your creativity. We've had really positive ratings on the class. I think, as I've already mentioned, that if you put people in a situation where they are working together, where they're collaborating, maybe even competing against this other opponent, those types of shared experiences can really bring joy into their lives. And that's how we've been able to do some Arbejdsglæde via gamification. Now, there's a couple other things that we've been working on, because sometimes people will ask, is that the only way that you can do things? What about other things? We've taken another class, actually, and done the same thing. We've used a different theme. This was more of a cryptozoology hunt theme, so this would appeal more to those types of people who were collectors. The previous class, the Agile Training Camp that I was talking about, we've been doing that for over 5 years now, so we've got a lot of experience in that. This class is a newer class. We're still experimenting with it. In fact, I think we're probably going to change the class because we've got some mixed results. It's not so much on the theme, although the theme is more of something that's been in progress, but it's the material, the other content of the class. So we think we're probably going to take a different approach with that anyways. One other thing here, and that is going back to our software development teams, one of the things that's been an issue for quite a while in Boeing is the idea of metrics. So management also always wants to know about metrics, how are our teams doing and so forth. The disconnect that's often happened, though, is that management wants metrics at this level. The metrics that are really helpful to teams are more at this level. So we thought, what could we do about that? Was there some way that we could do something there to gamify things to help projects to be able to use metrics that they're already using and yet provide some value? So what we ended up with, we just piloted this recently, so I'm not really sure where this is going to end up, but we ended up creating 4 categories for performance, predictability, value, quality, and satisfaction. And we asked teams to select measures that would fall into into those 4 categories. And then what we did to gamify it was essentially we said, okay, we're going to turn this into a fantasy football competition. So there it is, that football theme again. But what's interesting about fantasy football versus other types of numbers is that many times the other numbers people don't care about as much, but you can really get, there's a broad acceptance and enthusiasm for things like fantasy football. The twist that we put on it is, for fantasy football, you're just watching, you're just an observer. Once you set your lineup, you can't do anything about it. You're powerless, right? But in this game that we're trying, that we just piloted, the difference would be you're actually not only setting your team, but you're also a participant in the team. So what you do in that team setting from one session to the next can influence your overall score. And we also wanted to set it up so it was not only competitive, but also collaborative. So you earn additional points by being able to work with other teams. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see where it goes. Just another thing, another possible way of bringing in some Arbejdsglæde and gamification. All right, in conclusion, some things that I think I drew from this. Maybe you will do the same. You can actually do this. So even if you're working in a large company like Boeing, you can gamify things. But it may take some courage to try it. So again, if it's not your corporate culture, you may just have to go out and try something and see what happens, see what you can get away with, so to speak. You do want to be careful, though, about containing things, having a sandbox. There was one particular situation in one of our Agile training camps where the football wandered from the classroom into an area where it shouldn't have been and ended up knocking down these light fixtures. So you just got to be careful. You want to try and keep it contained. That was a lesson that we learned. As I mentioned, having a fun, relaxed environment can really help to promote creativity, competition, even with something as simple as nebulous as yardage, can even help to motivate folks. And I would encourage you to take your work seriously enough to make it fun. Look for ways to make your job enjoyable. Sometimes it may take a little more work in order to find that out, but I think for just about any job, you can find ways to make it fun. And it will be more fun if you don't take yourself too seriously. So again, thank you for your attention.